Okay, tonight we're going to talk about grouping sets, and we've got some pretty cool stuff going on tonight. I think this is actually pretty nifty. And joining us tonight on the Midnight DBA is the Queen of Sheba.
Close enough. It's Jen. Hi, folks.
So, okay, I was looking through, I was trolling through books online like I usually do, and I came across this example. Actually, no, I didn't come across this in books online. I came across it anyway. I came across this somewhere, and I actually had quite a bit of time working this out because something was throwing the result set off. So I've spent quite a bit of time on this, and I thought I would share the wealth and depth of my knowledge with the world. Right?
Absolutely.
So okay. So let's go over grouping just real quick, right? So we've got a table, we've got sales order header, and this is in AdventureWorks right over here, right? So we've got sales order header, and let's say we want to count all of the territories in there, right? That's pretty easy. Come here, count all the territories, blam, right? So territory 1, so on and so on, right? This is all of the sales orders for the territories. So this is how many orders each one of the territories has, right? So easy enough. Let's say I want to count all of the salesperson IDs, and that's pretty cool too. I can see how many orders each one of these salesperson IDs had. So again, grouping, this isn't really about the basics of grouping itself. There's plenty of tutorials on that, and maybe we can talk the Queen of Sheba here into doing one of them sometime soon on the basics of grouping.
Sure.
But I'm just kind of taking you through a progression. And now let's say that we wanted to see, how many salesperson IDs there were per territory.
Sure.
Right? Because that's actually pretty nifty too, right? So, or I'm sorry, not salesperson ID by territory, but orders by ID by territory. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I think so.
I did say that right.
So basically, for every salesperson in the territory, how many
orders
orders
did
for
he get,
that?
right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same one as the last one, only this one's also broken down by territory ID as well. Because in this last one, you can see how many orders each one of them had, but not by territory. So this will give you kind of a subgrouping, right? Mm-hmm. Now look, we've got here all of these nulls right there. And this is actually what threw me, and we're going to take that out in these subsequent queries because it just screws everything up. So we've got larger than a handful of these guys. In fact, let's look and see how many we have total. There you go. We've got 27,000 and change
That's
of orders that don't
with no
have
salesperson.
Yeah. Right? So, Jesus Christ, right? So, okay. So, when you do that like this, you get that, and you can see that it's spread out amongst the different territories. Woohoo! Right? That's the kind of thing this tells me, right? But let's say I wanted to do something like I wanted to get, say, a running total, or I wanted to get a grand total down at the bottom.
Sure.
And I wanted to maybe get a total for each individual territory, right? So I've got a count here of all of these by ID. Now, I did that up here, right? I've got my total count right here, right? But let's say I want to see a breakdown as well as a count. So right here, I've got my breakdown. I know how many, and let's go ahead and do this too before it pisses me off. That's not right. Yes, it is. Where salesperson ID is not null. There we go. So let's rerun this one. There we go. So now let's just get rid of those nulls because they're just pointless, right? So I see how many orders, and I'm pointing at the screen again, like you guys can see. I do that all the time. So I can see how many each one of these sales orders IDs has in each one of the territories. But what I can't see is the grand total of orders for every single territory in here.
Right, which is something you could get in a separate query, but we don't want it in a separate query. We want it all in one big result set.
Exactly. So enter in grouping sets.
Ooh,
and this I know.
what are grouping sets?
I know, huh? So, okay. So grouping sets are actually pretty cool, as it turns out. I can group these guys based off of the same group that I have here by putting them in parentheses. Okay? So I got the same group here that I had up here. Only now, see, territory and sales, and this I'm grouping it reversed, but it doesn't really matter. I could reverse that and get the same thing. Because, they're only going to have one group, and you're only going to have one territory and sales ID grouping, so it doesn't matter which one of them's first, really, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, here I can group these guys together, and that will give me the same result set as I had above, but then I've got sets. So I can also group by, I can have a separate grouping by territory ID, and what that's going to do is that's going to give me this aggregate by the territory ID as well. Okay? So it's not only going to give me aggregates based off of these guys that I already saw in these other two queries, but it's going to give me the aggregate based off of the territory ID as well.
Okay. For people that are new to this, I think we should run it and then maybe explain it over again with the visual.
Yeah. So here we go.
Like you weren't going to do that.
So right. So anything that shows up as a null is the grouping that's handled by this guy, right? So clearly I'm doing salesperson ID, and notice here I've got where salesperson ID is not null. Okay, so none of these guys will be null anyway, and I'm pointing at the screen again. None of these guys will be null anyway. So where it's null here, right here, this entire row, is the total of all the orders, of all the order numbers I've got for this region 1, and this is the total amount.
In other words, the first 6 rows of this result set here are your grouping by territory ID and salesperson ID, and then the 7th row is your roll-up of all of those. It's grouped by territory ID.
Yeah, it's like doing auto sum in Excel.
Yeah.
Right? So you go down here, and you got the same thing down here, right?
Yeah, row 11 is a grouping of the previous, 3 rows?
Yeah.
Right.
So then I get down here, and I've got both of these guys null because I've got a grand total.
Ooh.
And it's actually this null grouping set right here, the comma empty parentheses, that gives me that grand total. If I take that out of there and run this again, I'll have no grand total. I have no double null down here.
Ooh.
So I come here. See, I did Control Z there to undo my changes rather than try to mistype it. So now I'll bring this back. So now you see that since I'm grouping by territory ID here, that it's giving me this sum, and I'm pointing at the screen again. It's giving me this. I'm going to sit on this hand. It's giving me the sum right here based on, it's rolling it up at the territory ID level. Fair enough?
Sure.
So, but the problem is again, that itself isn't very clear. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's not very user-friendly.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because you just got nulls here.
Got
and
a null
like,
in there.
What the hell is that?
You
right?
got confused about that earlier and had to take out all your nulls.
What really threw me earlier when I was working on this was that we have 27,000 and change of salesperson IDs that didn't have that were null.
You mean 27,000 orders that didn't have salesperson IDs?
Yes.
I'm here to translate.
Yeah, what she said. So I'll come here, and you can see how this changes the face of things quite a bit.
Oh, that's with the nulls included?
Yeah. Yeah. And I couldn't figure out where the hell these numbers were coming from. What's going on here? And then I ran this one up here, the salesperson ID up here, and I said, oh, I've got nulls in there, and that's what would do that, right?
Well, if we're keeping nulls in, by the way, then how would you go about differentiating between a roll-up row and a row of actual null salesperson IDs? Because you may want to include that information.
On visual inspection, The way I've got it, the way I'm doing it right now, it's the first one because null comes before anything else.
I'm not sure if you can count on that because there's no order by, but if you don't have an immediate thing, then we'll just attack it later.
Yeah, well, there isn't. I had an order by. I dropped my order by. But, I mean, if you want to say order by salesperson ID, right?
Yeah.
Ascending. Let's see what we get because we know for a fact. Get out of there. We know for a fact that this one is 4594.
Well, and that's another thing is.
But that's for the territory too.
Is we can differentiate on.
Let's see if I order by that.
Maybe you'd probably have to order by territory ID.
Yeah,
but
I have to order by.
We'll take that out for a second, and I'll make the point that I was saying earlier. For visual inspection, go ahead and run it again. One of the ways you'd be able to tell, duh.
You're pointing at the screen.
I'm pointing at the screen. Well, you kept the is not null in. Let's keep kicking.
Oh,
out.
I see. Yeah, that's right. I thought that looked a little funny.
And one more time, just for fun.
Otra vez way.
Okay.
Okay.
And another way to tell is, let's see here, your roll-up row with the count is going to be higher than any individual row in there.
Well, yeah,
so
sure.
that could probably help too.
Well, yeah, sure. It's possible. So, but what if you got negatives in there?
Well, I'm not pointing it out.
What if they sold negative amounts?
No. I'm not saying that to point out that, hey, you're stupid. I just happened to see that and go, oh yeah, duh. The roll-up row is going to
Right. So there
more.
are a couple ways in this particular case.
Sure.
Right. In this particular case, this one always precedes the other one. Yes. Okay. We had technical difficulties, and by technical I mean her.
Well, I didn't do nothing.
Okay, so okay, and I couldn't figure out how to pause the recording. Okay, so this is dandy, but like I said, it's a little user unfriendly, right? Let's take this back out of here, and I'll show you just one more time. Okay, so we have all of these guys here, right? Right. Now, I've written this other version of the query that's a little bit longer, but it gets us a little bit closer to where we want to be. And now, this is really where it turns out to be the decision that you make at the time, okay? For the purposes of this video, I converted all these guys to varchar so that I could use actual labels.
Sure.
But you can just pick something nonsensical like 5 zeros or 5 nines or whatever the hell you want, right? Something that would be nonsense for you that you could pick out programmatically if you still need to keep this final salesperson ID as a number. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to shoot it to SRS or Crystal or whatever the hell, it doesn't really matter what type it is, right? It really doesn't.
The whole point is to make this more reader-friendly.
Right. So what I did in here was I just used a case statement, and I said, and so let's ignore this one for now. And yeah, let's ignore that one for now. And we'll ignore this one too. So all I did was a case statement. I said when the salesperson ID, when the salesperson ID casted as a varchar is null, then set it to salesperson total. And the same thing for territory ID. When the territory ID casted as a varchar as null, then set it to territory total. And of course I had to cast it because if it comes in as a number and I try to set it here to a string and it's a numeric type, then it's going to blow up on me, right? So I have to convert it to a string, then compare it, and then...
We're still dealing with a result set, so we actually have to have consistent data types.
Yeah, something like that.
Go figure.
So now when we do this whole thing... See there? I get something that actually says salesperson total, and down here I get salesperson total and territory total. So the problem is I don't want territory total down there, right? And that should probably actually say territory total. I think between the time that I did this one and I did the video, I think I futzed with it a little bit. because there was a point when I was getting territory totals in here too. But
yeah, that makes more sense because if the salesperson ID is null, then it's the territory total. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it is the territory total, so that's wrong.
Don't mind us.
Yeah, don't mind us. Take the theory away from it, not the actual practice of it.
Do what I say.
Now, what and again, for readability, what I did here was I also don't like this because I want grand total to be grand total, right? So what I did was I put in another row in here, and I'll just go ahead and uncomment both of them. Why not? That says when salesperson ID and territory ID together are null, then put grand total.
Right.
Right? So now when you run this, and it'll say grand total in both columns, but there's nothing wrong with that either, right?
Sure, sure.
So now I get a grand total for both of them, and I know exactly what I'm looking at. And it's something that I can even put as a temp table or as a what do they call those things with the little brackets up in the front with the with clause and the
Oh man, I knew before you said that. Common table expression.
CTE, yes, a CTE. Who's
I delivered.
Okay, so you could put it as a temp table or as a CTE, right? And then programmatically go through it, and you can find your running totals there in different ways, and you can do this in so many different ways. But I just wanted to show you guys real quick that how cool grouping sets can be. They can give you your totals, and it's really not that hard to work with. It'll take you about probably 5 or 6 queries of playing with it to figure out how they work. And there are different permutations of this, but grouping sets is just what it sounds like. You're grouping by sets.
Subsets of your result set.
Subsets of your result set, right. I'm a king tautologist. Right? And so the syntax would be group by, grouping sets, and then you just put every single grouping set inside of this parentheses here. I'll even... Oops, that was a shift. No wonder it didn't. So everything inside of these two parentheses here, right? Right there is a thing. So I wanted these two grouped together, and then I wanted this one grouped separately. And remember, the empty parentheses is what gives you your grand total down at the end. Cool?
Cool.
All right, that's all I got.